Hey guys, welcome to another video. In today's video, I'll be doing my May May wrap up. Oh my gosh. Let's start again. Hey guys, welcome to another video. In today's video, I'll be doing my May wrap up of all the books. Technically, it's one book that I read this month and all the other movies and TV shows that I've been watching throughout the month of May. So in terms of reading, I did very poorly, as I had just mentioned. I only read one book, unfortunately. I was reading another one, like I did start another book, but I didn't manage to finish it in the month of May. But I was also very busy watching a lot of different things in my spare time when I wasn't working and I wasn't out with so without further ado, we'll get straight into my May wrap up. Before we get started, you know the drill. Bubble tea. What do I have today? I have a lychee green tea. It's definitely the standard go-to bubble tea or boba that I usually go for if I want a fruit tea. So, ooh, that was good. I got it right in the middle. That is refreshing, even though it's a little cold today. I won't say no to bubble tea. So let's get the one and only book that I read during the month of May out of the way, and it was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I ended up picking this book up because I watched the Shadow and Bone series on Netflix and was absolutely like entertained by the Six of Crows characters in that show. So I ended up picking up Six of Crows because I actually have not read this duology before, and so I was really excited to pick it up. I've heard so many good things about this duology. Most people that I follow on BookTube highly regard this duology, and so I gave it a whirl. I enjoyed this book. It was highly entertaining. It was just what I wanted after watching Shadow and Bone. I had a really fun time with the first book in the duology. I actually ended up filming a reading vlog for this. I haven't yet edited nor uploaded that video yet, but it will be coming soon. I won't get into too much detail about this because I will be uploading the reading vlog soon, and maybe potentially I might do a book review on this book as well. But long story short, I enjoyed it. I had a fun time. It was entertaining. If you don't know already, this is a spin-off series of the Shadow and Bone trilogy, which now has, I think, 3 different series that is set in the same world, which we call the Grishaverse, mainly because the magic users are called Grisha and they play a major part in this book series. So this book is basically a heist novel. Six of Crows, if you don't know, is basically following somewhat of a group of criminals. Actually, not all of them are criminals, but essentially we're following a ragtag group of individuals who have very specific set of skills. We do have 6 main characters, as you can tell by the title, but focusing on one of the main characters of this series, even though we get the perspective of different individuals throughout the book. Yes, our main character is Kaz Brecker. This duology is essentially set mostly in Ketterdam, which is a city in the country of Kerch, which is a completely different location to the Shadow and Bone series, because that trilogy was set in Ravka, which is on the eastern side of this map. So this one is set in a completely different location, following a cast of completely different characters. It was nice to actually see that there was mentioning of some characters from the previous series. In this city, there are multiple kind of gang groups and they have their own little territories. We essentially follow one of our main characters, Kaz Brecker, and he is a leader of one of his gang groups. He does work for a higher boss, but he's basically a little bit of a lazy guy, and so Kaz is the one that actually takes charge and is leading this gang group. Anyway, one thing leads to another and they get hired to do an impossible task, but one that pays extremely well. It's a very dangerous situation for our characters to go on this mission, this quest, this heist. It was just highly entertaining. I was just enjoying the story for what it was. It didn't have a very elaborate plot line. When you kind of sit back and really look at the story as a whole, it is kind of a simple premise, but I would say that it has kind of a nice balance between character focused moments and the action and adventure that that these characters go on. I feel like there's not much more to say that hasn't been said already in this book community. I think I had very high expectations for this because I've heard so much hype surrounding it. I was only ever so slightly let down because I thought I would completely love this and I thought it would be my new kind of favorite book ever, but it wasn't. It didn't go up to that high tier ranking, but I still think that this was a very fun read. This story was put together a little bit more better than Shadow and Bone, even though I also found that trilogy entertaining and I liked it, even though they had some major flaws. This one I kind of felt the same way, but I did enjoy this book slightly better than Shadow and Bone. Like I said, I had a fun time. I would highly recommend this book. I'm excited to read the sequel to it, hopefully sometime soon in the following months ahead. If you're kind of looking for a book that is a little bit more gritty, it's following a bunch of criminals, it's a heist novel. These are all buzzwords that I really like, so if you think that sounds up your alley, then give Six of Crows a read. So yes, I ended up rating this book a 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and I recommend to give it a try if you're into fantasy. There you go. There you have it. This is the book for you. So yeah, this was the one and only book that I read in the month of May. Let us move on to the shows that I watched in the month of May. The first thing that I ended up watching, I've already mentioned, it was the Shadow and Bone series by Netflix. I also did a review, or should I say kind of my opinions about how I felt about the Shadow and Bone series, which you can watch here. I'll link it on the screen, but I was very much impressed, loved it. In fact, I think the show kind of improved upon the book series. It was a really fun series to watch, and now that I've read Six of Crows, I think they captured the Six of Crows characters really well, but also I think they had a lot more comedic angles to these characters in the show, which made them even more endearing and lovable, and so I was really impressed. I also really liked the casting and the actors who played the Shadow and Bone characters as well. I felt like season 1 really stayed true to the book. It really followed the story beats from the book that was translated really well into the show. I thought the special effects was really good. I loved the costumes. I loved the setting. It had a very interesting edit style. When it came to the Six of Crows storyline, it was a little bit more lighthearted, but it had a more grittier feel. It was very kind of fast-paced. Camera movement did these weird kind of transitional shots and stuff. It was kind of fun. It was a stark contrast to when the story was following the Shadow and Bone storyline, but I feel like the show did a really good job merging the two storylines together. In terms of the book Six of Crows, nothing was translated story-wise into the show. It was more like the characters they took out from the book and kind of incorporated them into the TV series, and it's kind of like a prequel, I suppose, to the actual Six of Crows book story, if that makes sense. Am I making sense? I feel like I just rambled, but yes, I had a fun time. I kind of felt very like nostalgic, even though I only read the Six of Crows trilogy only a few years ago. I wasn't really a part of the hype train, but when I read it, I was very much entertained. I enjoyed the series, even though, like I said, had a bit of flaws, but I still overall thought the series was fun and I enjoyed my reading experience with that series. And so when I saw it translated on screen, I was just really floored by how seamlessly it was adapted by Netflix. I think the Shadow and Bone series also has a little bit of that cheese, but for the most part, I thought that it was really well done and they kind of improved upon a lot of things. There was a lot of things in the books that would have fleshed out kind of the world and character motivations a little bit more, but I think overall, you know, it's a show, they have a specific runtime, and I think they did their best with the material that they had, and so I thought it was a really good adaptation. And I think even in my reaction video or like review video of the Shadow and Bone Netflix series, I think I did say that I enjoyed the TV show a little bit more than the book, because it's essentially a given that the book is always better than the movie or adaptation. In this case, I would disagree. I think that the show does a better job at portraying a more enjoyable story than the book did. I also was really interested in the Six of Crows characters because in the show they were so fun to follow. In fact, I enjoyed following those characters more than I did the Shadow and Bone characters. I definitely think that they improved upon Mal and Alina in the show. The Darkling, like I think he might have been written a little bit better in the book. books, but I feel like bedbugs did an amazing job, and so whatever, but the Six of Crows characters I feel like were the superstars of the show, and so highly entertained. I would recommend it. The next kind of TV show that I watched was also by Netflix. It's Love, Death and Robots, and this show, if you don't know, is an anthology piece, so each episode is an animated short film. I really enjoyed the first volume that I think came out a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago or a year ago, I'm not too sure. The first volume had some things that I wasn't a big fan of, but there were some animated shorts that I freaking loved, and so when I heard that volume 2 was being released this year, I was so stoked. I had such a fun time the first round that I was really excited to see what they did with volume 2, which is season 2 of Love, Death and Robots. Did I enjoy it as much as volume 1? I would say that there were some that I really liked, but some of the shorts from volume 1 just really spoke to me and I really loved, and so this one was slightly disappointing compared to the first volume, even though they had a few shorts that I really liked as well. I feel like with any sort of anthology series, episodes can be hit or miss, so I kind of went into this series with that expectation. However, in volume 1, I think there were a lot of episodes. Give me a second, I need to search this. They only had 8 episodes. I feel like the first volume had double the episodes than volume 2. I don't know how to feel about it because there was less content to kind of enjoy, but also I feel like in volume 1 there were a lot of animated shorts that I wasn't the biggest fan of, and so if it did take out some of the ones that I didn't like, then it might have been better as a whole. But you know, animation takes a lot of effort and I appreciated everyone who worked on each of these short films, and so again, I was very much entertained. I would say give it a go if you like science fiction because it does a nice job of opening you up to new worlds, and it's kind of short enough for you to be entertained briefly by if you can't commit to a whole series. They're only like 15 minutes long at most, I think. For curiosity's sake, I will tell you guys my favorite episodes from volume 2. Ice was really good. This animation company did one of my favorite episodes from volume 1, which was Zimmer Blue. So good. I thought that was so visually stunning, and I thought like it had more of a philosophical approach. The story for this one was a lot more simpler, but the animation style again is beautiful, it's stunning. I'll read the description that Letterboxd has. It says, in a future where many humans are enhanced with extraordinary strength and endurance, the unmodded feel left behind. This class conflict drives a rift between two brothers that puts their lives at risk during a dangerous race. I feel like that's a lot to put in a 13-minute short, but I felt like they were able to capture that in such a short amount of time. And like I said, the animation's beautiful. I think this episode was my favorite in volume 2, which was called Pop Squad. This had more of an emotional impact. I thought I was watching one thing, and then when it was revealed to be this kind of way of life, it was just horrifying how the future had come to this. And it's basically about a future where you can choose to live forever, but because of overpopulation, you're not allowed to have kids. It follows a cop that is in charge of a unit that takes out people who break this law, and the way they execute it is so disturbing. I was just so enthralled about this concept. The animation style is a little bit more on the realistic angle, but also the facial features of the characters look a little bit more exaggerated. So I did like this style as well, but more than the animation style, I was really captivated by the story. It had a very serious, somber undertone. It had a very beautiful, futuristic, utopic society that kind of reminds me of BioShock Infinite, where there's essentially like a city in the sky, but when you come down to the ground levels of society, it's very kind of gritty, dirty. It's just kind of a slummy area, and you just see such a stark divide in the two worlds. It's beautiful, and the concept, loved it. And then I would say either Snow in the Desert or All Through the House was also one of my favorites from volume 2. All Through the House is probably one of the only comical episodes. I think we had 2 comical kind of episodes, and this was one of them. This episode is basically following 2 kids on Christmas Eve. They're trying to catch Santa, and it has a very creepy, disturbing twist to it, but I really loved the angle that this episode took. It was just so funny and so cute, but also a little bit scary, and so I loved it. I loved it. And also the animation style was a little bit more claymation, and I really liked that too. Snow in the Desert, it had more of a hyper-realistic style of animation, but I also liked the story. It was very simple, basically following this dude who's essentially immortal, and then we have a heap ton of bounty hunters trying to get a piece of this dude. It was entertaining. It was an entertaining watch, and I think more than anything, the story was lacking, but the animation style, if you do like hyper-realistic animation, I think this one was really good. I thought it was really beautiful. It's kind of set in like a desert planet. It had a very Mad Max kind of vibe. This one is quite violent, and it also had more action, but yes, I also really like that too. Rating volume 2 as a whole, I think I would give it a 3.5 stars on Letterboxd. Overall, I was entertained, and I love animation, so this anthology series is really good to see like a variety of different types of animation, but also I really like science fiction, and so Love, Death and Robots really encapsulates a sci-fi aspect to all the animated shorts. It's a fun time. I think there's something for everyone. There's more comedic ones, more horror ones, more action-packed ones, more kind of suspense thriller stuff. I think I stayed on Love, Death and Robots for way too long, so we're gonna move on. Even though it's not a show, one last thing that I'll put under this category before I go into the movies that I watched was a short film from a movie that I watched last year and really much enjoyed by Pixar, which was Soul. I ended up watching an animated short from Soul, and it was 22 versus Earth, and I thought that this was a very cute little side story. I gave it 3 stars out of 5. It was just like a cute side story about 22. It kind of gives a backstory to how she was like before the events of Soul, and so yes. Okay, moving on to the movies that I watched in the month of May. The first movie that I ended up watching was Nomadland, and this was, I think, awarded Best Picture from the Academies. Am I correct in that assumption? I'm pretty sure it won Best Picture. I actually went into this movie not knowing anything about it. After watching it, I thought that it was more of a thought-provoking movie, and I really appreciated that this movie kind of put focus on the elderly and how they're treated, how they struggle in the later years of people's lives, how society kind of throws them away, and there's no kind of plan or benefits that elderly people have at the end of their lives, and it just had a very kind of depressing look on how the older generations are treated by the government or society, and it's just kind of a really sad watch, but it was just stunning to watch. It was so beautifully filmed. It's also directed by Chloe Zhao, which is so impressive. She's a Chinese American filmmaker, Asian represent. Actually, I don't know if she's Chinese American or Chinese. Anyway, regardless, I thought that she made a very powerful and thought-provoking movie. The movie's set, I think, during the Great Recession. It's basically following this woman in her 60s, I think, late 60s, and she's kind of traveling throughout the US, taking odd jobs here and there, and just living a very nomadic lifestyle, hence why Nomadland. She comes across a lot of other elderly people in her similar age bracket that is kind of suffering from similar struggles. When I went into the theaters, it was only a small group of people in there, but they were all, aside from me and my 2 friends, I think everyone else in the theater were like elderly people, and I feel like it probably really resonates well with the elder generation, and so I thought that was both cute and very sad, and I'm kind of curious to hear how like more senior people found this movie. I just thought that it was a very emotional watch, and especially because I work with a lot of elderly people, it kind of gave a different perspective. I teared up like 2 or 3 times while I was watching it, and so I would highly recommend it. It was kind of more character driven. You're just following this one woman and how she encounters a lot of different individuals throughout her journey that are kind of suffering in different ways. It's sad, and sometimes I like sad movies, so what can you do? I ended up giving this movie a 4 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd, and I would highly recommend this if you just want to watch something that's a little bit more understated. How should I say? It's more of a simple premise when you look at it, but it's more an emotionally driven movie, and also, like I said, filmed stunningly. How Chloe Zhao kind of captures moments and landscapes in this movie is just so beautiful to see on screen. However, it is more of a slow moving, slow paced story, and you're just there watching and experiencing this one woman's journey. Anyway, moving on to the next movie that I watched in the month of May, which is something completely different. It was The Thing by John Carpenter. This movie is iconic. You may not know, but I am a huge fan of practical effects when it comes to movies. I get so captivated with practical effects when I watch a movie. This movie has always been on that top tier list of like the best practical effects in movie history. I feel like I've seen a lot of pop culture references for The Thing in numerous different movies and shows and stuff like that, but I don't think I ever watched The Thing in its entirety, and this was the first time I sat down, I watched it with a friend. Thank you, friend. It's cold these days in Australia, so it's the perfect weather. How can I explain The Thing if you don't know about it? It's set in Antarctica following a group of scientists, and then they come across a specific entity that shapeshifts, and so it's kind of like a creature film that is highly suspenseful because this otherworldly creature can shapeshift, and the scientists are pretty much in this isolated area where they can't escape because of this barren icy wasteland. You'll die anyway. It has become one of my favorite creature movies. I wish that I had watched this earlier in my life. I love a lot of things about this movie, but the practical effects, yes, give it to me. I love the creature design in this movie. It's so disgusting, so horrifying to watch, but I just can't stop looking at it. It's just so amazing. The creature look, usually alien designs, they kind of make the aliens look cool. This movie, it's freaking disgusting, and I loved it. It's so squelchy and so, I don't know how to describe it, but it is horrifying. Our leading man in this movie is Kurt Russell, my love. I feel like a lot of the characters in this movie made very logical decisions because they're scientists. I feel like they made good decisions throughout the movie. Some here and there that kind of was a little bit, okay, horror movie cliche, but for the most part, love the characters. And once they kind of figured out what was going on, the suspense was real. I feel like there's only a handful of movies that does suspense really well in movies, and this is one of those movies. You're constantly on edge on who's pretending to be human, and I freaking loved this movie. Oh my gosh, I can't say it enough times, but I was so entertained. Loved it. I'm probably gonna watch it again and again and again in the future. It's gonna be one of my go-to kind of horror movies. What more can I say? I cannot believe that this was made in the 80s. Oh my gosh, the 80s had some bomb-ass films, and I am living for it. I better have rated this 5 out of 5 stars because I freaking love this movie. Yes, I did. I definitely went through a horror phase in the month of May for some reason. Maybe because it was autumn, the weather was getting colder. I was in for more of a thrill. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm kind of in denial that I don't like horror, but I actually do. A lot of my favorite movies that I've watched in recent years are horror movies. So maybe that's the genre for me now. Anyway, I love The Thing. Oh my gosh, new favorite horror movie. If you want something very suspenseful, horror, sci-fi, creature movie, I can't even articulate this in a sentence, but if those are buzzwords for you, highly recommend. If you haven't watched it, iconic. Moving on to the next movie that I watched in the month of May, my most disappointing watch. It's Army of the Dead. This is by Zack Snyder. This was released on Netflix. I was super hyped. I thought that this was just gonna be a fun, dumb action zombie movie, and it's pretty much that, but it took itself way too seriously. The characters made such stupid decisions that I just thought that they should all die. I think I liked maybe 3 of the characters in this movie. There was one individual that I absolutely hate, or actually there was a few that I hated, but there was one that I thought was so irritating. More than anything, some of the villains in this movie, it's just like cookie cutter villain. Didn't live up to the zombie standards that I have. No, it did not. I will say that this movie had a very cool concept, a very unique concept when it came to zombie movies. They did something very, very unique with the zombies, and I appreciated that. Just the way the movie was executed, it was dumb, and I freaking hated it, and I was just so disappointed. I was actually really rooting for this movie to be a new kind of zombie movie that I could appreciate and just have fun with. No freaking way. Like I said, good concept, very poorly executed. The action also, there were some fun moments, but also I feel like they could have done a lot more with like the action as well. I need a drink. Okay, so basically the story of this movie is that we're following our main character, Dave Bautista's character. How should I say it? He's like an ex-military soldier or something. There's this zombie virus outbreak that has occurred. The whole of Las Vegas has been blocked off, so these zombie hordes are just in that area. So one day a corporate rich dude offers him a ton of money to go into Las Vegas to retrieve a ridiculously huge amount of money, and then he can get a cut of the money. I don't even know how they could carry that amount of money. It would be so heavy, even though I freaking hate this idea because it's clearly maybe potentially a trap. Anyway, it's stupid, but okay, our character's motivated. He kind of rounds up a group of people that can help him go in there and essentially retrieve the money from a casino. The guy that hires him is the casino owner. It's essentially a heist movie set in a zombie apocalypse, but a very contained zombie apocalypse. When I think about it now, this concept has been done, which was Train to Busan Peninsula. It's essentially the same thing. In that movie, a group of individuals are hired to get money from the peninsula that has been closed off due to a zombie outbreak, and then the team that goes in get a cut of it. Now that I think about it, it's the same movie. It's just the Zack Snyder version. But also, that movie sucked. I will say Train to Busan, the first movie was really good. The second movie was shit. And so I don't know why they got the same concept and remade the movie. Now that I think about it, oh my gosh, it is essentially the same movie. Plot-wise, like the look of it is completely different. The main reason why I'm so angry about it is because they had an amazing concept in terms of the zombie hierarchy thing. Very interesting, very unique. I think that could have paved the way for a new type of genre, subgenre of zombie apocalyptic movies. It might still happen. There might be a movie that comes out in the future that executes this concept a lot better. But this movie ain't it. And I feel bad saying that this was a crappy movie and I didn't enjoy it, because so many people have hyped up this movie and have loved this movie, and I don't know why. I think if they took it in a way that's like fun action with lots of comical aspects, I think it could have been a fun movie to watch. But because they took it way too seriously, they had so much melodrama in the midst of a zombie city, you didn't need that. I think it could have been a purely survival horror story with action, like fun action, that could have had a bit of comedy. But no, it took itself way too seriously. I think they should have taken the melodrama out of it. I probably would have liked it better. I rated Army of the Dead 2 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. I was being a little bit lenient for the action, for Dave Bautista's character and the concept. I was just highly disappointed. It's probably more of a 1 star. I should do 1.5 stars actually. It was so cheesy and so predictable, and just the characters made such stupid choices. Horrible. In this day and age, why? It was just so very cringe. I'm upset. I'm upset. The next movie that I watched in the month of May, it was A Quiet Place Part 2, and I am so freaking happy about this movie. I loved A Quiet Place when it was first released and I watched it at the theater. It was such an experience. It's basically set in a post-apocalyptic world where our planet has been invaded by alien creatures who hunt by sound. So if you make any sort of slight noise, they will come and they will slash and kill you. The first movie doesn't take place as this invasion is happening. It actually takes place a year after the invasion has happened, and so you have these characters living on a remote farmland, and they've adapted their living conditions to live in a world in essentially silence, because you can't make a sound in this world, otherwise the aliens are gonna come. And it just had such an interesting angle to a horror film. Even though from the outside A Quiet Place is categorized into the horror genre, it's actually a very beautiful movie about family, about the love that a family can have. John Krasinski, who's the director of Part 1 and Part 2, did a wonderful job in telling a story that is set in such a scary post-apocalyptic world where the alien invasion has happened, but he really stripped it down to focus on this one family. It's a very isolated story and it really focused on the characters, and so I really loved the first one. The tension is really high. They had slower moments to build character, build on the relationships that this family had with one another. The daughter in this family is also deaf, so the movie does a really good job at perception of how everyone else hears and sees the world and how she hears the world. I think the most impressive thing, aside from the character development with the first and second movie for A Quiet Place, is the sound design, because you hear every little crackle, every little dirt movement, and and like any little sound. To live in a world where you have to establish a way of walking around and doing your daily chores and activities without making sound is so hard, and the way that the set design is laid out is just so interesting, is incredible. If you can't already tell, huge fan of part 1, and so when I watched part 2 I was so incredibly happy. Probably went into it a little bit more biased, but came out of the movie very happy as well. They did a lot more to expand the world a little bit. I did film a review video, I will link it in the screen above, for this movie because I was just so entertained by it. Loved it. Definitely a direct continuation. At the end of the day, it kind of leaves on a little bit of a cliffhanger, a major cliffhanger, so you know that there's going to be a part 3 sometime down the line, and I'm so in for it. I really hope that they wrap up this family story in part 3 and they close off this storyline. If they can wrap it up really well, I think this would be a really tight series of movies that is set in a very interesting post-apocalyptic world. If you're not a fan of horror, this is a horror movie that I feel like non-horror watchers can also enjoy. It's just very suspenseful and it's just filmed very beautifully. I ended up giving this movie a 4 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. Okay, so moving on to the final movie that I watched in the month of May. It was The Ring. Like I said, I was going through a horror phase, I think, in the month of May. And no, not the American remake, it's the original Japanese movie. It was so creepy, but I'm so glad that I watched it at my age, because if I watched this when I was younger, like if I was in high school and watched this, I would be so freaking traumatized. But I think watching it at an older age, I was able to appreciate the film and not be too scared about it. Like, I'm not gonna have nightmares or anything from watching The Ring, but it was really creepy and I was slightly disturbed. I don't really like supernatural ghost movies that often, but I think this one did a really good job on unsettling the viewer. If you don't know about The Ring, which I feel like everyone knows The Ring, even if you've never really remotely looked into the plot of it, I feel like everyone kind of knows what The Ring is about because it's such an iconic movie. Again, it's so embedded in pop culture now. The ghost comes out of the TV. That's like one scene from the movie, to be honest. The Ring is directed by Hideo Nakata. It was first released in 1998, so it's a 90s movie. Wow. Basically in this movie we're following a journalist who's wrapped up in this mystery. There's kind of like this urban legend about a tape that's going around that if you watch it, you get a phone call immediately and then 7 days later you get killed by something. And so there's this journalist that's trying to unravel this mystery. She gets wrapped up in it. It's an insane time. I feel like if anything, the most creepy aspect is the film, the tape. You get to see what it actually looks like when they're watching it. It's almost like a tape that you would watch in a contemporary art museum, to be honest. Yeah, something about the tape is just a little bit unsettling and creepy. But the whole movie, there is this kind of tension, especially when the main character figures out that this may potentially be a real thing and she's already watched the tape because she's trying to unravel this mystery. And so this character is on a time limit. At the end of the day, was it a good movie? I think so. I think for its time, it was a really good movie to kind of spark off this subgenre of ghost movies. It probably wasn't the first movie that did the long hair kind of ghost, you know? But I definitely think it's iconic for a reason. I think, you know, watching it now, I was still creeped out by it. I'm glad that I finally watched The Ring because I was like scared for the longest time because I heard that it's one of the most scariest movie of all time and whatnot, and I was just like, I don't want to put myself through that, because even though I like horror movies, I don't actually enjoy when I'm really horrified. But after watching it, it actually wasn't too bad. Maybe some people still might find it terrifying, but for me, it wasn't too bad. I think it's very hard to really unsettle me to my core. I think The Ring was alright. It was an okay horror movie and I'm very proud of myself for watching it. Yes, I finally did it, guys. I watched The Ring. Oh my gosh. It's funny because like in high school I had like really long black hair and I was kind of nicknamed The Ring. I don't know if I should be proud about that fact, but it's something that did occur in my high school days. I probably was in denial that I was actually getting bullied by that, but I ended up giving The Ring 3.5 4.5 stars out of 5s on Letterboxd. I thought that it was an enjoyable kind of horror movie to watch. I think it's kind of a good movie to watch with your friends. If you want a little bit of a scare, I'm glad that I watched it with my friend. I would never watch this by myself. If you really don't like horror movies, this is the one movie out of all the movies that I watched this month that I wouldn't recommend to non-horror watchers, because it is quite creepy. The horror element is very much in the forefront of the movie, and so if you're not a fan of horror, I wouldn't recommend it. But if you're a fan of horror, or if you don't mind watching horror, I think it's a good watch. Because it's such a cultural phenomenon, I would recommend everyone to watch it. If anything, I'm actually really surprised by the cinematography. Like, I thought that the movie, even though it's a really creepy movie about a ghost that kills people, the movie looked really good. The locations that this character went to was just really stunning. It was just beautifully filmed. I know it sounds kind of stupid when you're watching a horror movie, but I really like cinematography, and so I thought that the movie, I liked how it was filmed. Anyway, that is it. Those were my May books, TV shows, and movie wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have read Six of Crows, I'm pretty sure everyone's read Six of Crows. I'm probably the last one, to be honest, to have read that. If you watched any of the shows and movies and you've enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it, let me know. Please let me know. Oh my gosh. And like I said, it was a horror month. The Thing is still one of my favorites to have come from this month. I guess that's it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed my video. Stay safe, guys, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!